The Numbers TV? It's your boy Paul Rowe. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and like a video if you appreciate the content that Paul Rowe and What's the Numbers are providing. Today we back with another profile piece. This one is on Magoo. In this video we're going to take a look at his early years coming up in the Bronx, New York. Then we will look for answers on the many different questions people have about Magoo's gang history and time behind bars in the New York State prison system. And lastly, we will talk about where Magoo is now after being caught up in a recent blood indictment out of North Carolina a few years ago. Pedro Gutierrez, better known as Magoo, is from the Bronx, New York. Growing up in that area in the late 80s and early 90s will be tough on any kid. Many blocks in the Bronx back then looked like a war zone and were filled with abandoned buildings and drug spots. Magoo, by the age of 17, would end up being a member of the Trigger Finger Posse, which was a Bronx gang that allegedly trafficked in drugs and killed 7 people in the early 90s. Magoo, not long after turning 17, will be arrested on an armed robbery charge and make his introduction to Rikers Island. After spending a few months locked up, he will eventually be released back to the streets of the Bronx and will end up getting arrested 5 more times. The last arrest will be for murder, where he supposedly shot 4 people and one of them died. Locked up with a fresh murder charge, Magoo will be returning back to Rikers Island. But this time, Magoo was supposedly returning to Rikers Island as a Latin King. This information confirmed by many of his first generation Bloods and also some Latin Kings that have done interviews on different YouTube channels. At some point while waiting to go to trial on his murder charge, Magoo will somehow fall out of favor with the Latin Kings, and depending on who you ask, will end up leaving or getting kicked out of the gang. While awaiting trial, Magoo will end up in the box after slashing 4 inmates and being caught 7 times with weapons. According to news reports, he received what was then a record 1,040 punishment days in the jail segregation unit. During his stay in the Bing, as they called it back in the day, Magoo would come in contact with some of the original members of the New York City Bloods. At the time, the Bloods were a group of several African American inmates in Rikers Island that had bonded together to protect themselves from the Latino gangs that were dominating the jail. Magoo over time would gain the trust and acceptance of the Bloods by allegedly pointing out, setting up, and putting in work on some of the Latino gang members that will make their way to the box. After he put in enough work and proved his loyalty to the Bloods that were in the Bing with him at the time, Magoo, along with Wildcat, became some of the first New York City Bloods to be of Latin descent. Magoo, according to court documents, said he was officially brought home in March of 1994 by S.I., who was another legendary high-ranking member of the Nine-Trey Gangsters that was killed by police in August of 2015. Not too long after turning blood, Magoo was convicted of second-degree murder in 1996 and sentenced to 26 years to life. He would soon be on the move to a New York State jail in the mountains, where the war was on with the Nietas and Latin Kings. The Bloods would show they were ready for the battle and would start to spread like wildfire and begin to take over the state prison system. As time passed, the UBN, which stands for the United Blood Nation and consists of a bunch of different sets under the UBN umbrella, would start to go through power struggles. Certain set leaders would want more power than the other, and little beefs and rifts in the gang would start to take place. Over time, some sets will leave or get kicked out the UBN as they restructure certain things. Magoo, by this time, will be well into his bid upstate, but because of his classification and write-ups, he will be spending the majority of his time in the box, away from the everyday dealings of the general population. Magoo's name will be held in high regard as he maintained a high-ranking position in the gang for years, eventually becoming the head or chairman of the UBN in 2003, a position supposedly given to him by S.I. when he was getting released from state prison. Now, to understand the prestige of that position, you have to understand the Bloods on the East Coast a bit. Even though they're a street gang, the Bloods started in prison, and that's where they still maintain most of their power. Yes, a bunch of Bloods free in society, but it's easy to just do your own thing in the free world. The Bloods in jail are forced to run a tighter ship and follow protocol more. So being the head of the Bloods in jail, where you can control most of the moves being made, actually made Magoo one of, if not, the most powerful man in the New York State prison system. Next, we have to speak about the migration of the UBN Blood sets to down south. Many of the original UBN sets like Nine-Trey, G-Shine, and even Sex Money Murder, although they are independent now, have sanctioned sets in different states down south. And this is where the latest chapter of Magoo's story takes place, because in May of 2017, he was part of an 83-person indictment out of North Carolina. Already in jail for 25 years over the murder he was convicted for in 1996, Magoo will now be facing another 25 to life in the feds for his role in this new indictment. In the indictment, the feds say as the godfather of the set, Magoo conducted gang business and participated in the distribution of gang dues while incarcerated in the New York State Department of Corrections. He also ordered a gang war in North Carolina in 2011, directing that members of the UBN Bloods attack and kill members of a renegade blood set called Pretty Tony. The war resulted in numerous injuries among inmates and the lockdown of 5 North Carolina prisons for 6 months. Magoo refused to cop out and ended up going to trial on the racketeering charges he was facing. After a 2-week trial, Magoo was found guilty and in September 2018 was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. He's currently in Florence, ADX, with a release date in 2036. But yo, it's What's the Numbers TV is a quick profile piece on Pedro Gutierrez, better known as Magoo, Inferno Light. You know, he got a few different names. One of the first Bloods in New York City. Definitely one of the first Spanish Bloods. Put a lot of work in, put a lot of pain in. Definitely put on for the Blood whole movement and ended up moving up the ranks and getting a lot of status within the gang. Now, some people say he was Latin King and why did he switch this and the third. There's no real story that's out there like concrete. Some people say it was a fight and some Latin Kings ran on him, left him to fight a bunch of Bloods, and you know what I'm saying? Some people say he caught cases with some Latin Kings and they told on him on it. So there's a lot of different stories. Nobody knows exactly what was the story, but according to multiple people, he was definitely Latin King and something happened and he switched over to Blood. Now, as far as the whole is Magoo snitching this down the third, the reason I ain't touch on that in the videos because I feel like everybody isn't qualified to speak on everything. If you ain't walked 25 years off, 10, 15 in the hole, catch a new case in the feds after you're 26 and go catch another 20 years, go to trial, ain't telling nobody on the trial. So it's like, I'm not gonna call that man a snitch. Is it proper protocol for the GF of a hood or the chairman of the whole U to be speaking to the gang unit? Probably not, but it was a conversation supposed to get out the hole. Who knows? I'm just saying, I can't call that man a snitch over a conversation he had when he ain't even really telling. He ain't say nothing about nobody else in the conversation. He just spoke about certain dealings he had and, you know, certain things that happened to him and how he became who he became. So I can't call him Blood. A lot of channels that is going around calling him a Blood and calling him a Blood, calling him a snitch, this and the third. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like that's the right thing. Now, as far as also Bossy Jazzo, which is where the content came from originally, he didn't do nothing wrong because he got the content firsthand. One thing I do give him, he gets a lot of big name Bloods to do interviews that haven't done interviews in no other platforms like Pimp. He had Disco just recently. He had Uno B up there. You know what I'm saying? That's the person he got the info about the Magoo, which is firsthand. Uno B was in that indictment. So it makes sense to put that out if that's what he's saying. Now, like I said, I don't think Magoo's a snitch, but that's my opinion. Everybody got their own opinion. Now, one more thing I want to touch on. A lot of people had, being that Magoo was Spanish and all that, their other big homies or other Bloods feel a way about a Spanish person running the whole gang when it started as a black movement to go against the oppression of Spanish gangs. I don't know. You have to ask certain OG Bloods or how they felt about it. I'm pretty sure it was a little bit of hate, though. That's just obvious from outside looking in. But I don't know if it was ever a movement of people trying to push that, you know what I'm saying, within the gang. But like I said, it's a quick profile piece on Magoo. It's What's the Numbers TV. Make sure you go follow the Instagram, the Patreon, the merch. The email's in the description if you want to holler at me. And we got a lot more things coming, man. So just stay in tune. It's Poe Ross, What's the Numbers TV. We back before you know it. We out of here. Peace.